The dropship had landed hard on the war-scarred surface of the moon, called Kareth 9, a place where the rocks were black, the sky was red, and nothing green had ever grown there since the first orbital strike turned the whole place into a graveyard. Of ash and broken machines, the human strike team moved quickly. Dropping from the ramp with silent feet, their suits gleaming under the faint light of the twin suns, their helmets scanning for movement, heat, or any signal that might give away the location of the enemy command bunker buried somewhere deep. In the jagged cliffs ahead, there were 10 of them, elite, chosen, trained. For war behind enemy lines, and at the front of the squad without saying a word, walked CadeHunterQuiet.com, deadly, and always the first one in. They called him the T. Ghost in combat reports. He never shouted. He never hesitated. He just moved forward with a kind of focus that made even the officers nervous. Because Cade wasn't sent into fights to survive. He was sent to end them. But not this time. This time, someone else knew they were coming. It happened less than 3. Minutes after touchdown, the canyon exploded beneath them, sending 2 of the squad flying in pieces. A swarm of micro-drones burst from hidden caves in the walls. Trip mines lit the ground with blue fire. And before anyone could form a line, they were surrounded by a killing net of auto turrets and plasma bursts. Cade turned just in time to see his second-in-command. Vera cut down mid-scream by a burst that tore through her chest plate like paper. The comms went to static. The lieutenant tried to give a fallback command, but his helmet melted before he finished the sentence. Within 60 seconds, it was over. 9 elite soldiers gone. The smoke drifted low. The echoes of gunfire faded. The bodies were burning. The dropship was gone, and standing alone in the middle of that dead canyon, one hand pressed to a bleeding cut across his ribs, stood Cade, his rifle broken, his backup pistol melted, his HUD shattered, and his armor cracked. But his eyes were still calm, his breathing slow, his hands open and ready. He looked around slowly at the smoking remains of his team, crater where their mission had died. And then at the distant cliff wall, where a small, blinking red light marked the location of the enemy's forward sensor array. And then, in the silence, he spoke. Not loud, not angry, just quiet, like he was reminding himself, now it's just me. Cade didn't wait for help, because help wasn't coming. He knew Earth's protocols. If a Black Ops mission failed this fast, the High Command would already be deleting the files, erasing their names, and telling their families they died in training. Exercises. Which meant he had no radio, no satellite map, no drone support, no evac. Just his blood, his boots, and a growing list of enemies who thought they had already won. He moved fast across the rocks, staying low, staying silent, picking up anything he could use from the fallen ammo cartridges. Broken lenses, sharp metal edges, he tore off a piece of melted armor and strapped it to his forearm with wires, turning it into a makeshift shield. He snapped a half-burnt belt into a sling to carry fragments of explosives. He'd carved a knife out of a cracked alloy plate. He didn't look back at the bodies. He couldn't. They were gone. His job wasn't to mourn. It was to make sure that people who did this never slept again. By nightfall, Cade had already mapped the ridge above the sensor post. He watched silently from a ledge, unseen by the alien guards who laughed below, unaware that a human still breathed. One of the creatures, a tall, yellow-eyed commander with mechanical limbs, spoke into a communicator, confirmed all 10 human. Soldiers eliminated. Perimeter secure. No survivors. Cade didn't blink. He waited until the creature walked beneath the rock shelf, then dropped. No. Sound no hesitation. One strike to the neck. One twist of the stolen wire around its throat, and just like that, first of them fell, far away in the enemy control tower. A signal flickered. A red light blinked once, showing unit lost. The tech officer ignored it, probably just a sensor glitch, he muttered. But on the moon below, Cade Hunter stood over the dead body, grabbing a cum piece and whispering into it, "You missed one." The enemy didn't send soldiers first. They sent drones, fast ones, silent ones, with cameras sharp enough to read DNA from orbit. with claws that could slice steel, with scanners that could smell heat through 10 meters of rock. And they didn't come to search. They came to confirm that all the humans were dead, because that's how they always did it. Step 1. Ambush. Step 2. Sweep. Step 3. Clean up the corpses and report mission successful. They didn't expect resistance. They didn't expect life. And they definitely didn't expect Cade Hunter. High above the blood-black canyon, 2 drones hovered slowly in patrol formation. Their wings buzzed gently in the wind. Almost peaceful, till they began scanning heat signatures across the rocks. One paused. It saw something: warmth, movement. It zoomed in, at first. The image was unclear, just a shimmer between 2 rock spires. Then it focused. A human figure. Standing tall, no helmet. No, it's a weapon, just blood on his face and a broken metal rod in his hand. The drone beeped and sent a burst. Transmission to the central system, human survivor detected, and then it dove straight down. Engines flaring, blades extended, internal weapons warming. This was not a search anymore. This was an execution. But as it fell, just seconds from slicing through the man's neck, Cade vanished from the shadows beside the cliff. Cade moved with precision, ducking just 1 second before the drone passed overhead, spinning low on one knee and swinging the metal rod upward into the drone's tail rotor with perfect timing. Crack! The tail spun out. The drone spiraled. Cade grabbed the edge of its frame, yanked it down midair, and slammed it against the rock with such force that its wings crumpled like paper. Its camera sparked, its scanner cracked. And then silence. The second drone saw it happen. It paused in midair, analyzed, recalculated, switched mode to attack pattern 2. But Cade didn't give it time. He reached into the crushed drone, pulled out a sharp plasma coil, still humming with power, and waited. When the second drone came close, this time careful, dodging, scanning at all angles, Cade threw the coil like a spear. The charged metal stabbed straight into the drone's eye lens. Blesha. Spark. The drone dropped from the air, like a falling star, smashing into the canyon floor in smoke and silence. In the enemy control ship orbiting above Careth 9, a red light blinked. Drone units 22 and 23, offline. A technician frowned. What happened? The officer shrugged. Rockfall? Attic. Discharge? Nothing survives down there. Cade moved fast now. From the crushed drones, he took what he could. Wiring, sensor eyes, small blade arms, micro battery cells. He strapped one arm's blade to his forearm, rigged the battery cells into a shock trap, and clipped the sensor eye onto his shoulder as a wide-range scanner. The machine wasn't his enemy anymore. It was his tool by the second hour. He had already mapped the next enemy patrol route using the drone memory chips. By the third hour, he used their communication static to jam the next incoming sweep. And by sunset, the next wave of drones arrived 6. Of them, this time, in formation. Moving faster, but none of them made it past the first ridge, because Cade had already built a trap. He had rewired the battery cells to overload if triggered by aerial motion. He had set them under loose rocks and camouflage. He didn't need guns. He had the enemy's own tools, and when the first drone crossed the trap line, boom, the others spun to escape. But their sensors went black. Cade had already fed them a looping static file from the fallen drones. They thought they were flying forward. They flew straight into the cliff wall. 20 minutes later, Cade sat under a jagged overhang, sharpening his blade arm with a stone. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't proud. He was calculating, because if the enemy sent drones, the next thing they'd send would be soldiers. But they still didn't understand what was really happening. They thought a human was surviving. They hadn't realized yet. A predator was hunting back on the orbiting control ship. The command center was buzzing with alerts. Commander, we've lost 8 drones. Their memory logs are corrupted. Someone jamming us from the surface? No, there's no signal. Then how the hell is this happening? The commander's face turned pale as the screen showed fragments of the last drone's footage. A human no weapon, bloodied hands, and eyes locked on the camera. The footage glitched. But one final phrase was recovered from the audio file. "You found me, now I find you." The commander stood up slowly. "Prepare ground squads. He's not running. He's coming." The enemy didn't waste time anymore. After losing to drone waves and finding nothing but wreckage, the commanders on the orbital warship decided that machines weren't enough. They needed something more aggressive, more brutal, more precise. So, they sent the trackers. Not soldiers, hunters. They were part organic. Part machine bred in labs to chase heat and blood across mountains and caves. They didn't need food, didn't speak. They moved in teams of 3, followed by warhounds with metal teeth and noses that could sniff. Carbon dioxide from 5 kilometers away, they dropped into the canyons like shadows. 12. Trackers. 6 hounds. One mission: find the last human burn. Him out. Bring back his skull. Cade was already waiting, not in a tunnel, not in cover. He was lying flat under the thick black roots of a crashed shuttle. Deep in the rock bed, covered in ash and cooled sand, his heartbeat slowed, his breath shallow. His body pressed so still that even the drones would have thought. He was already dead, but his eyes were open, watching, measuring. He heard the hounds first. Low snarls. Mechanical breathing, boots behind them. He didn't move. He let them pass. Let them walk through the dry valley with weapons raised. Thermal eyes scanning left and right, and then, when the last hound passed by only a meter from where Cade lay, hidden, he struck. One arm shot out, blade to throat. Pull back, no bark. No scream, just one more dead machine beast lying on its side. The tracker behind it turned but 2. Slow. Cade moved like smoke rolling from the dirt, grabbing the hound's fallen jaw, and hurling it upward into the tracker's face with all. His weight behind it crack, the lens shattered, the tracker stumbled, arms flailing for his pulse cannon, but Cade didn't give him time. He slammed his knee into the tracker's chest, grabbed the shoulder port, and twisted it hard. A power cell popped out, hissing and sparking. The tracker fell 2 down, 10 left. But now they knew he was alive. The comms lit up in red. Target located. Sector 4. Deploy fire teams. They wanted to flush him out with fire, so they brought flamethrowers. Cade saw the glow before he saw the flame. Orange fire pouring into side caves, lighting up cracks in the rocks, turning cool sand into rivers. Of heat, smoke filled the lower ravines. If he stayed down, he'd cook alive. He'd in single quotes. He went up, he climbed the jagged cliff face like an animal, his fingers finding grooves, boots slipping twice, lungs burning from smoke. He didn't stop. Above the flames, the wind still moved. And where wind moved, scent scattered. Heat vanished. Tracking failed. By the time the flame squads reached the cave below, they found nothing, except one tracker lying in pieces, and the words "come higher" carved into the wall with a bloody blade. 2 more trackers followed up the cliff. Cade waited for them at the edge. When the first one's head cleared the ridge, he was met with a boot to the jaw that launched him backward off the cliff. The second raised a rifle just in time to get tackled. They rolled, kicked, bit the tracker, slammed Cade into the rock. Cade spat blood, then jabbed his elbow into the creature's throat again, and again, and again, until it stopped moving. The remaining 8. Trackers regrouped near the old cum tower. The lead unit activated an energy grid, spinning a blue shield across the clearing. "He's fast," one of them said, his voice cold and low. "But he's still human." "He bleeds," another replied. "We press in together." They moved like a machine, perfect steps. Perfect arcs, they entered the cum tower through 2 paths, each holding thermal grenades and knives designed to pierce Kevlar. What they didn't know was that Cade had already reprogrammed the tower, using salvaged drone parts and rewired relay chips. He had turned the cum tower's internal beacon into a wide range, magnetic scrams, and soon as the trackers entered, their HUDs went blind. There. Weapons locked up, their targeting froze, and from the smoke came fast, silent, precise. 6 minutes later, only one tracker crawled from the tower. Half his body was torn. His eyes were wide. He gasped into the cums. He's not running. He's pulling us in. Then something grabbed him from behind, dragged him back inside. His scream was short, then gone. Up in the orbital command ship, tactical officer stared at the blinking screen. All 12 trackers lost signal. The commander's hand trembled. Impossible. Sir, confirmed. He's moving north, toward the base. The commander stared hard. He's hunting us. Down below, Cade stood at the edge of a ridge, looking at the enemy base glowing in the distance. His body was bruised, bleeding, burned, but his eyes, cold, clear, focused. He whispered to no one, "You should have sent more." Then he turned toward the enemy's stronghold and began walking. The outer perimeter of the enemy base was built like a fortress. High metal walls, scanning towers, motion sensors, trip mines, and squads of guards armed with pulse rifles and disc raws. And orders to shoot anything that moved without a command code. It was the most secure facility on the moon, and no one expected a single man to reach it on foot, especially not without weapons, armor, or support. So when a low-level officer spotted something strange on one of the cameras, a shadow crawling beneath the edge of the southern ridge, he laughed. "Another dust ghost," I said to his squad. "Maybe the wind picked up one of the corpses again." His friend chuckled. "Yeah, let's see if this ghost bleeds." They zoomed the camera in. A figure moved slowly, quietly, just beyond the sensor range. It was a human, alone, on foot, wounded, barely standing, and smiling. The laughter stopped. Cade Hunter wasn't sneaking anymore. He didn't crawl. He didn't hide. He walked straight toward the outer fence step by step, covered in ash and dried blood. His shirt torn, his arms bruised, jagged blade tied to his wrist with burnt cable. He knew they were watching. That was the point. The outer guards shouted, raised their weapons, and triggered the alarm. Sirens howled. Floodlights lit up the entire valley. Speakers blasted warnings in 5 languages. "Surrender now. You are outnumbered. Drop to the ground." But Cade didn't stop. He kept walking until he was 20 meters from the gate. Then he looked up at the nearest camera, raised one hand, and pointed toward the base. Not surrender. A warning, inside the command center. Officers scrambled. He's not carrying a weapon? He's walking straight into the kill zone? Shoot him already. But Commander Arvital, cold and cruel, smiled from the high control platform. "One man," said. "Let him come. It'll be a message." So they opened the gate, just a little, and sent out a fire team of 6 armored soldiers, big, loud, laughing. "This is going to be fun," one said, loading a shock baton. Another spun a blade in his hand. "Bet he runs." But Cade didn't run. He stood still, waited, watched, and then, when they were 5 steps away, he moved. It happened so fast the cameras almost missed it. Cade slipped left, ducked under the first swing, drove his shoulder into the nearest soldier's gut, grabbed the man's own baton as he fell, and flipped it into the next attacker's. Jaw cracked, a tooth flew out. Cade rolled low, grabbed a dropped blade, stabbed backward into a 3rd soldier's thigh. Then spun and elbowed another square in the throat. 4 down. The last 2 hesitated. Cade threw the blade perfectly timed. It slammed into the 5th man's knee. He dropped screaming. The 6th turned and ran. Cade didn't chase. He picked up a rifle, looked at the tower camera, and dropped it. Didn't even want it. Inside the base. The laughter died. Commander Arvik's smile faded. "Sound lockdown protocols," he barked. "This isn't some grunt. This is deliberate." The base sirens blared again. Lockdown initiated. Every gate sealed, every hallway armed, every soldier placed on alert. But it was all ready. It was too late, because Cade had entered. Through a service, shaft meant for water cooling. He crawled through vents, moved between shadows, Used every broken drone part, every stolen tool, every dropped comm device, and one by one, soldiers began to disappear. Not in open fights, not in loud shootouts. They'd just stopped reporting. A guard went into a tunnel and didn't come back. A patrol entered the East Wing and didn't return. A backup team was sent. They found blood and nothing else. Panic spread like fire. He's inside. He's killing without sound. We can't see him on cameras, one young officer cried. He's not human. But Arvik shook him. He is. That's what makes this worse. In the East Wing, a soldier found a blood trail. He followed it, rifle shaking in his hands, light flashing on the walls. He turned a corner, nothing. Turned again, still nothing. Then he looked up. Cade dropped from the pipes above, landed with both feet on the man's shoulders, slammed him to the floor, knocked him out with a single strike, and dragged him into the dark. 40 minutes later, half the base had gone silent. Commanders shouted. Cross radios, no answer. Security feeds went black, sensors overloaded with static, and somewhere in the central hall, a single message was painted in blood across a sealed door. I told you to run. Now they weren't laughing. Now they weren't hunting. They were hiding, praying, waiting for someone else to deal with it, but no one else was coming. Because Cade Hunter, the man with no weapons, no backup, and no mercy, had just turned the strongest base on Karith 9 into a graveyard with walls, and he was just getting started. The base was falling apart from the inside, and not because of bombs or fire. It was fear. Fear that walked through metal corridors with bare hands. Fear that didn't shout or speak or threaten. Fear that wore a human face cut, bruised and quiet, and every soldier inside the enemy stronghold now knew his name. Cade Hunter. He didn't need weapons. He didn't need a team. Didn't need orders. He had purpose, and that was more dangerous than anything. Commander Arvik stood in the central command chamber, his face pale as the death count scrolled across the main screen. 34 units offline. East Wing silent, North Barracks breached. Power grid unstable. He slammed a fist into the console. This is a joke, he growled. He's one man, one of his captains whispered. No, sir. He's something else. Arvik issued new orders. No. More patrols, no more recon now. It was containment. They sealed corridor doors behind. Magnetic fields. They flooded hallways with poison gas. They activated shock panels on the floors. It's designed to fry anything warm-blooded that walked through. And in the deepest chamber of the base, they released Unit Z-12, a combat mutant bred in labs, tall as a tank, built for one thing only: tear through anything that bleeds. But it didn't matter. Cade kept coming. He moved through smoke and gas, with a mask made from shredded cloth and a filter pulled from a downed technician's kit. He slid beneath magnetic gates before they could lock. He threw metal plates across shock floors to trick sensors and walk free. Every trap they set, he used it against them. In the southern hallway, 5 soldiers waited behind cover. They heard footsteps, slow, heavy, steady. They raised weapons, hands shaking. He's coming, one whispered. Fire the moment you see. Too late. Cade dropped from the ceiling. Pipe hit the ground behind them, grabbed one by the back of the helmet, and slammed him into the wall. Another turn. Cade kicked his knee in, took his rifle, used it like a hammer on the next. Only one shot fired. It missed. Cade didn't single quote. One floor up. Unit Z-12 roared through a hallway, smashing through doors. Sniffing the air, it heard something. Turned a corner, and there stood Cade's shirt. Torn, chest bleeding, holding a jagged pipe like a spear. The creature growled. Cade didn't flinch. It charged. Cade waited. Right before impact, it slid sideways, drove the pipe through the mutant's side, spun behind it, and yanked a power cell. Loose from its back, it turned too slow. Cade threw the cell at its face. It exploded when the smoke cleared. Only Cade was left standing. Again, in the command center. Silence filled the room. Then came a voice through a broken radio. Channel. It wasn't loud. It wasn't full of rage. It was calm, focused, and final. You had your chance, the soldiers inside. The base started turning on each other. Why didn't you kill him in the canyon? He had no gun. He was supposed to be dead. No one gets out of this. But Cade didn't want to get out. That was the part they didn't understand. He wasn't trying to escape. He had already accepted. He would die. He just wanted to make sure they went first. Now he walked straight through the core halls of the base blood. On his arms, fire behind him. Nothing in his hands. Just his eyes. Eyes that didn't blink. Eyes that didn't feel sorry. Eyes that had already seen too much death to feel anything anymore. He didn't speak. He didn't run. He just kept coming. The last defense team stood guarding the control vault. 15 soldiers with heavy armor, shock batons, and plasma shields. They didn't laugh. They didn't even talk. They knew what was coming, one by one. The motion sensors went dark. The cameras blinked out, and the lights in the hallway began to flicker. Then silence. Then a sound. Soft footsteps. And then nothing. Until something hit the vault door from outside once, twice, 3 times. Then it opened only. Cade stood there, breathing heavy, blood dripping, and no one left behind him. He stepped inside. The soldiers screamed and fired. But Cade moved like smoke, like wind through wires, too fast to stop. Too hard to break. 10 seconds. 15 max. Then silence again. Now only one man remained. Commander Arvik. He locked the final door, backed against the wall, shaking. A light flickered above him. The power grid was dying. His cum was dead. No one left to call, and then, from behind the door, came a knock. Soft. Precise. 3 taps. Like a heartbeat. And then the door opened. Cade stepped inside. Arvik raised a pistol. His hand was shaking. Cade didn't flinch. "Do it," Arvik gasped. "Kill me." But Cade didn't move. He just looked at the commander for a long time, then said softly, "I'm not here to kill you." He walked past him, to the console, smashed it with his elbow. The base alarms died. The lights shut off. The systems collapsed. He turned back to Arvik, who was frozen, confused. Cade stepped forward and whispered the last thing the commander would remember. "You're going to live. And you're going to explain what happened here." Then Cade disappeared into the shadows. When the lockdown orders were given, the base's defense system sealed every door, every vent, every escape tunnel with heavy steel slabs and magnetic force fields. The soldiers thought they were cutting Cade Hunter off. They thought he was stuck inside. But what they didn't understand was something simple and terrifying. He wasn't trapped with them. They were trapped with him. The lights were dim now. The power grid was damaged. The oxygen vents were slow. The emergency lights blinked on and off. The base, once a fortress, felt like a tomb. And inside that tomb, Cade moved like the wind in a fire. He was no longer hiding. He didn't need to. He was hurting them. He had studied the layout from broken schematics pulled off dead technicians, from memories during the infiltration and observation. Now, every step he took was part of a plan. He didn't run from the lockdown. He used it. He sealed the outer fuel depot by jamming its control circuit, forcing the eastern guards to evacuate. Into narrower corridors, he fried the western armory's magnetic key panel with a drone coil. Locking 3 squads inside without weapons or light, he blocked the lower hangar doors by placing 2 dead hounds in the sensor path, making the base think the exit was unstable, and when the officers tried to override it, the system redirected power to the prisoner sector, which Cade he had already filled with sleeping gas. He was rewriting the base's systems with blood and scrap, turning rooms into traps, turning paths to dead ends. 1 squad of 6 tried to escape through a vertical maintenance shaft. The leader shouted into the dark, "Move fast. Get to the vent stack." They climbed. Up, 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 then hiss. Then silence. One of them looked up. A shadow dropped. Cade landed on the top one, grabbed the ladder with one hand and snapped the soldier's spine with the other. The body hit the one below. They screamed by the time they reached the shaft exit. Only one man remained, and he was blind from smoke, up in the command chamber. Commander Arvik stared at the master display. None of them made it out. His officer nodded, trembling. "Sir, we've lost half the base. Not in battle. In the walls." "How many are left?" The screen flickered. 65% casualties, remaining units scattered, trapped. And then the main screen went dark. A new message appeared, painted in red font across black. "You wanted a lockdown? Now you die inside." Every survivor in the base felt at that moment where their roles flipped. They weren't guarding the base anymore. They weren't defending anything. Now they were just prey. The hunters were being hunted in the southern corridor. A team of armored elites took defensive position. Behind barricades, motion scanners, grenades, drones, and hover mode, they waited for Cade, but he never walked in. He never had to. Instead, he climbed through the ceiling shaft, silent like smoke, dropped behind the first soldier, and took him down before the others even realized the sound they heard wasn't their own. Breathing, panic, bullets fired, smoke. When it cleared, 5 were down. 1 missing. Only a trail of blood remained. Back in the northern section, the medical team tried to break the emergency seal. They shouted, called for help, banged on the walls. The lights flickered, then turned red. A single flashlight clicked on. Cade's face appeared in the doorway, half in shadow, dried blood across his brow. He said nothing. He just stepped inside. By the 7th hour, the base was a maze of smoke, flickering lights. In silence, the screams had stopped. The radio was quiet. No one gave orders anymore. No one ran. They just sat in corners, hiding, waiting for the sound of footsteps that always came slow. Heavy, calm, in the command center, Commander Arvik looked. Around at his last remaining officers, one was praying, one was crying, one had locked himself in a closet and wouldn't come out. And Arvik. He stared at the ceiling, listening, waiting, because he knew what was coming. Next, not an army, not a message, not a bomb, just footsteps. He walked alone now. Cade, no helmet, no armor. His hands bloody, his boots heavy, his breath calm. He passed the remains of every room, the training sector, the mess hall. The barracks. He didn't stop to check the bodies, didn't need to. He already knew the count. He reached the final hallway, the vault, the last sealed chamber. He didn't knock this time. He just placed his hand on the door, and the metal burned beneath. His touch, not from heat, but from intent. Because now, the base wasn't just losing a battle, it was losing its soul. The thing it thought couldn't be broken. Commander Arvik had never felt fear like this before. Not when he first stepped onto this moon. Not when the war began. Not when his officers warned him of the human called Cade Hunter. But now standing in the command vault, alone, with every escape route locked, every officer gone, every room dark, he felt fear in his bones. The kind of fear that didn't shout. The kind that crept up slowly. The kind that whispered, "You're not in control anymore." His fingers trembled as he slammed codes into the terminal. Command priority, open channel. Broadcast to fleet? Nothing. He tried again. This is Commander Arvik. Karth 9 base under siege. 1 human inside. We've lost over 70% of personnel. I repeat, send backup now. The screen blinked, static, then a response. But it wasn't the fleet, it wasn't an officer. It wasn't even human sounding. Just a slow, quiet voice that echoed through the speakers like smoke through wires. No one's coming. Arvik's heart stopped. He looked up. Who is this? Silence. Then the voice returned. They can't hear you. I broke your relay 4 hours ago. Arvik backed away from the screen. The voice continued. You should have left when you had the chance. Across the base, Cade Hunter walked through. The smoking ruins of the central wing. Not rushing, not dragging, just walking. Doors were already open for him. Security systems were offline. Bodies lay where they had fallen, some still holding weapons. Some curled against walls. Frozen in fear, Cade didn't stop to look at them. He was almost done in the command vault. Arvik tried the final override key for the escape pod. His hands were shaking now, sweat running down his back. The pod hissed. Lights turned green. Door unlocked. He stepped in. But the moment his foot touched the floor, the lights turned red. A message blinked across the pod screen. Pod disabled. Flight lock engaged by external manual override. Arvik's breath caught. He turned slowly at the end of the corridor. Lit only by a flickering ceiling panel, stood Cade. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't charging. He just stood there. Blood on his arms, dirt on his face, silence in his eyes. Arvik raised a shaking pistol. Stay back. Cade didn't move. The pistol fired once, twice, missed both times. Cade didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slowly one boot after the other until he stood just a few feet from the commander. Arvik backed into the pod door, panting, terrified. Why? Why didn't you leave? You could have escaped, could have lived. Cade looked at him and finally spoke. You killed my team. Arvik swallowed hard. It was war orders. I didn't choose this. Cade took another step. You laughed. When they burned, Arvik fell to his knees. Please. I'm the last one. There's nothing left. You win. Just take the pod. Just leave me alive. But Cade shook his head slowly. This isn't about winning. He reached up and tapped the pod control panel. The lights inside the escape pod shut. Off. Cade didn't enter. He turned away, walked down the corridor, leaving Arvik alone in the dark. Arvik sat there for a long time. No sound, no lights, no rescue. Just the weight of what he had done and the footsteps that still echoed in his ears. Meanwhile, outside the base, the ash winds blew quietly. The base winds loud, was full of alarms. Soldiers shouting was silent now. Dead at the ridge. A scout ship from the outer patrol finally landed, responding to the old emergency beacon before it died. Completely, the soldiers stepped out carefully, scanning no signs of life, just bodies, smoke, scorch marks. Then they saw a figure walking toward them, alone, slow. No armor, no weapon. No weapon, just a human. With fire in his eyes, one soldier stepped forward. Who are you? The man stopped, looked up, and said quietly the one they thought wouldn't survive. The sky above Kareth 9 was gray and full of dust, and the wind carried the smell of metal, smoke, and death. Where once stood the strongest enemy base on the moon, now there was only silence, broken doors, shattered systems, and bodies lying in shadowed halls. No alarms, no signals, no signals, no Ashta, and a single man walking out of the fire. Cade Hunter moved slowly now, not because he was weak, but because there was no reason to run anymore. He had already done what no one expected. He had destroyed an entire base with no backup, no support, no gun, and no help. He had used what he found. He had turned the enemy's strength against them. Now, there was nothing left to fight. The base behind him was dead, and so was every soldier who had stood inside it, far above the moon's surface, on a silent military cruiser. The Earth Command officers stared at the satellite feed. There had been no updates for 48 hours, no live signals, no cum logs. Then the emergency beacon sent one last flicker, and what they saw made every officer in the room lean forward in shock. It was a camera feed from a drone damaged, half frozen, still barely transmitting. And in its final seconds of life, it showed one man walking through the smoke, alive, alone, covered in blood, and leaving the battlefield. Like he was walking out of a dream. They called the general. They called the brass. They called every scientist, every analyst, every security. An officer who had ever said Cade Hunter was just a man, because now that man had walked into the darkest place in enemy territory, and no one else walked out. The recovery team touched down 3 hours later. They landed on the edge of the canyon where it had all begun. The team leader stepped out, looked around, and whispered, "What happened here?" They walked through twisted gates, past burned mechs, cracked walls, and scorched insignias. They found no movement. No resistance, only Cade, sitting on a rock near the edge of a broken radar tower. With dry blood on his arms and silence in his eyes, he didn't stand when they arrived. He didn't salute. He just looked up and said one thing: mission complete. They asked him questions. So many questions. How did you survive? Did you have outside support? Were there any allies left inside? Did you bring back data? Cade just shook his head. No weapons. Backup. Just me. They looked at the ruins, looked at the body count, and realized it wasn't a mission report anymore. It was a legend, back on Earth. The military classified the incident as Red Level Blackout. All data sealed, all names erased, official story, mission failed. All personnel lost. Unofficial story: one human destroyed a base built by a dozen alien races. Alone, they tried to keep it quiet, but secrets never stay. Hidden, not stories like this, not names like Cade Hunter, in the darker corners of space. Bounty hunters whispered about him. Mercenaries argued if he was real. Pirate crews told campfire tales. Of the human who didn't need guns, only rage and focus. Some laughed, some believed, and some stayed away from Earth altogether, just in case the story was true. Years later, in a training academy on Mars, a young recruit asked her instructor, "Sir, do you think that story's real, about the man who wiped a base with no weapons?" The instructor paused, thought for a moment, then smiled. "I don't know," he said. "But I'll tell you what scares the enemy more than weapons, armor, or fleets." "What's that?" He looked the recruit in the eyes. "One human with nothing to lose." And somewhere far beyond the stars, on a quiet station with no name, a man sat alone at a small table, drinking water from a metal cup. His hands were scarred. His eyes were calm, and behind him no banners hung, no medals gleamed, no songs played, just silence. Because he didn't want a parade, he just wanted them to remember that he came with nothing, left behind no one.